Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another helpful beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new content. So today what I'm going to show you is another stitch tutorial. So if you've seen some of my other more recent stitch tutorials, you might recall me saying how we had filmed a bunch of these about a year ago, and we have since upgraded our camera and our lighting and our filming techniques. So we wanted to redo some of these using all of those updated techniques. So that's what we're doing today, and today is right angle weave. So again, this is not a project. This is simply how to do the stitch. So we're going to get started, and I'm using 4mm fire polish in a couple of different colors to illustrate. And we'll link you to our collection of fire polish below as well. We have so many colors to choose from. And so this is a really good bead to practice this stitch with if you've never done it before or you want to just brush up on it. So stamp out some of these here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is how to do 4-bead right angle weave, just heading in a straight line. And then what we'll do is I'll show you turning the corner and how you do a second connected row. So for this first part, we'll just be using this lighter color here. So I'm going to start by picking up 4 of my fire polish, and I just have some 6-pound fire line on a size 12 needle, and again, it's just a stitch tutorial, so there's no specific length I'm working with here. I have my 4 beads. I'm just going to bring them to within a few inches of the end, and I'm going to circle back through all of them, so that way my needle and my working thread are both coming out of the same side of the same bead. And when you pull this all the way down, you are of course going to get a little circle of 4 beads. Just like that, pretty simple. It's not too tight yet, that's okay. What I like to do next is I like to take my tail and my working thread and I tie them in a square knot. So if you're not familiar with a square knot, it's like a double knot, but that second knot is done backwards. So you do right over left, pull, and then you do left over right, and then pull. And a square knot will stay together much better than a double knot. Now what I want to do is I want to encourage these beads not so much to sit like they are here. I really want to square them off. So I want to have them sitting essentially with right angles. So I want to have one at the left, one at the right, and then one at the top and one at the bottom. So I have a lovely little square here with a bead at each side. Now, I am all about the visual analogies. So one of the visual analogies that I like to use is a compass or even a clock. So if we were to look at this, and this is a compass, we would have our north bead, our south bead, our east bead, and our west bead. And so that may make doing this a little easier for you if you can imagine that picture. Another thing I will do is use a clock analogy. So we have 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So that will come into play as we're doing the right angle weave. So just try to keep that picture in your head. All right, now, as with many stitches, I like to go through a bead or two before I start the actual stitch, because right now I'm not coming out of a bead, I'm coming out of a knot in between 2 beads. So I'm just going to go through the next bead in my circle here, just like that. Pretty simple. Now, we're going to make another unit of 4 beads. However, they will share a bead, and this is the bead that they're going to share. It's the bead that I'm coming out of. So to make another unit of 4 beads, knowing that 1 bead is already there, we just have to pick up 3 more beads. Just like that. And you're going to loop back around and through the same bead. So my thread and my needle are coming out of the same bead on the same side of that bead. And we're going to pull this down and we will get another little unit of 4 beads. Just like this. Okay. Now, to go back to that analogy, those analogies that I talked about, like the clock or the compass. So in our original circle, If this was 12 o'clock, we've added 3 new beads and we circled back through 12 o'clock. And this bead is now the 6 o'clock of the next unit. Just like this bead here, which is the 12 o'clock of this unit, will become the 6 o'clock bead of the next unit. So knowing that we're going to go in a straight line, our thread is not currently coming out of the proper place for adding new beads. So what we have to do is, just like we had been coming out of our 12 o'clock bead, we want to be coming out of this 12 o'clock bead before we pick up anything new. So we just want to continue in this circle for the next 2 beads. So we're going to go up 9 o'clock and then across 12 o'clock. So let's see. And you may be able to get through more than 1 bead at a time, but I don't recommend that. So I just went through the 1 bead and I'm giving it a nice little tug. And I'm going through the next bead and I'm giving it a nice little tug. This is going to help to keep your right angle weave nice and tight. And it's not just about pulling your fire line, but it's also how you pull. So, or rather the direction that you pull. So when I pulled, when I was coming out of this bead, I'm pulling in the direction that the whole of that bead is running. So I'm not pulling up and away from that bead. I'm pulling, if the whole of this bead is running this way, that's how I'm pulling straight out into the side, the same way that that hole is running. And that's what's going to keep your right angle weave nice and tight. So now we're going to do the same thing again, and I like to flip my work as I do it, just so that way my needle is always working, pointing away from me. So I'm going to pick up another 3 beads. I'm going to loop back around into the bead that I'm coming out of. So the 12 o'clock bead of my current clock, or the north bead of my current compass. Pull this down. And so, like I said before, the bead that we just looped back into, our 12 o'clock bead or our north bead, is now the 6 o'clock bead or the south bead of our new clock or our new compass. And just like before, we have to go up 9 o'clock and across 12 o'clock, or through the next 2 beads in that new circle, because then we'll be at the very end of our strip again, and we'll be set up to do another unit. So give it a nice good tug in the direction that it's coming out of that bead, straight out to the side. I'm going up through, grab my fire line, up through my side bead, and I'm pulling straight up. And then I'm going up through that top bead, and I'm pulling straight out to the side. That's what's going to keep us nice and tight. And that's what we have. So I'm going to take a quick little break. I'm going to get a little bit more of this worked up, and then I'm going to show you how we would do a second row sitting right next to this first row. So I will be back in just a minute. Okay, so I have worked up a bit more of my right angle weave, as you can see, into a long strip. And now I'm going to show you how you properly turn a corner and start to attach a row going down the side, because this is going to be a little bit different. So right where I ended up is going across my new top 12 o'clock bead, or my new top north bead. Again, if you imagine that top 4 bead unit is like a clock, we have 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. So I'm going across my 12 o'clock bead, and this is where if I was going to keep going, I would just be picking up another 3 beads, looping back around, and then up the next 2 beads, and then picking up 3, looping back around, and then up the next 2 beads. And if you find that you have trouble with right angle weave and this part you're still struggling with, I would say pause the video here, go back to the beginning, and keep trying to get this part down. Once you are very comfortable with this part, it's going to make the second part that much easier. So really make sure you master this first. But now I'm going to show you how we do that second row. So what I'm going to need to do is go through one additional bead, and that is down this side bead right there. Okay, so technically down the 3 o'clock bead of that last clock. Okay, now For most of the units on this side, we'll only be adding 2 beads at a time because we're going to be utilizing 2 beads that are already here. Just like when we were doing these units, we wanted 4 bead units, but we were adding 3 beads at a time because we were utilizing 1 bead that was already there. We're going to be utilizing 2 beads that are already here. So it'll just be picking up 2 beads at a time to complete each unit, except for this first one. For this first one, to create the start of the next row, we do need to pick up 3 beads, and we're going to join them to the bead that we're coming out of. So I'm going to use a slightly darker color for you for this next row. So I'm going to loop back around through the bead that I'm coming out of. Just like this. So we made our next unit going off to the side. You can see that just like these units here all share a bead that connects them, these 2 units here heading in this direction share a bead that connects them, which is that one right there. So there is a right angle weave cheat method, and I don't recommend it, but I'm going to show it to you just so you can know to not do it. Some may tell you to now head straight through into the next side bead. But the whole deal with right angle weave is that every move you make needs to be in a right angle. And if I do that, I'm technically not making a right angle. I'm going straight from this 3 o'clock bead straight down to this 3 o'clock bead. You always want to imagine that you're at a T intersection, and every bead you go through, you're having to pick right or left. You are never going straight through that T intersection because you're going to end up in someone's front yard. So that's basically what you want to remember if you're trying to figure out where to go. You always have 2 options and that's it, right or left. So in this case, that's heading down. That is heading straight through our intersection, so we don't want to do that. We're going to, in this case, go to the bead on the right. And the reason I know it's the bead on the right is because if I pick the bead on the left, that's sort of heading into older beadwork. So try to use that sort of common sense there to know, okay, I want to head back into the newer beadwork. So we're going to head right into that new bead. Give it a nice good tug to keep everything nice and tight. And that's what we got so far. So now it's going to be the same steps to add the rest of the rows. That will be different from this one. These steps will all be the same, and it'll differ from this first one here. This is what you'll do every time you're turning a corner and starting a new row. But then after that, we're going to do what I'm going to show you next. So in this case, we're going to make another clock. And the beads that we pick up are going to be the 3 o'clock and the 6 o'clock. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a second. Hopefully that picture will start to become more clear for you. So I'm going to pick up my 2 new beads. And so the 2 new beads are basically going to sit right here. So I'm coming out of the 12 o'clock of the 12 o'clock bead of the clock that I want to finish. And I have right here my 9 o'clock bead already present. And I'm just going to loop back around and through. So I have my 2 new beads on my needle. I'm going to loop up into the bead that's going to be my 9 o'clock bead, and you're going to see as I pull this down how it all makes sense and how it all comes together. Okay, and you can see that we're starting to get that little circle there. And again, just like before, you have to make a decision. Do I go right or do I go left? If I go to the left, right here, that's older beadwork. So remember, we want to stick towards newer beadwork. So that tells me that I want to go to the right, because remember, right angle weave, we're always moving in right angles. So that tells me I want to go right into this bead. And you're going to see that clock or that circle of beads come together. And you can see how that unit formed. Give it a nice little tug. And you can see how we have another clock formed right next to it. In this particular clock, we have 12, 3, and 6 that are all with the darker color. And then we utilized the bead from over here, that lighter bead, as our 9 o'clock bead. So to add the next unit, we need to get to the area that needs that new unit. So that tells me that we can't stay here and pick up more beads. So that tells me we have to go right or go left. Now, if we go left into this bead, that's heading backwards. It's heading into older beadwork where we don't need to go. So that tells me I have to go right into the newer beadwork because it's heading me down towards the area that I want to be in to create my next unit. Now I'm still not at the right spot yet. So I want to get to where I can circle into these two beads right here, because those are going to be the two beads of the next clock we have to finish up. So this will be 12 o'clock, that'll be 9 o'clock, and we're missing the 6 o'clock that'll sit here and the 3 o'clock that'll sit right here. So I need to go across the 6 o'clock of the clock we just finished, the 6 o'clock bead. I need to go down that 9 o'clock bead. And again, if you look at it, we did create a right angle. So when I was coming out of this bead here, we could have gone right or left. Right would have been heading back into old beadwork, and that's not where we want to go. So I had to make that right angle decision, and I had to go right. I had to go left, which is this bead right there. As long as you keep asking yourself those questions, after every bead you go through, you have to make a left or right decision. You can't go straight through something. It may appear straight if that's how you're holding your beadwork like it did here, but it was technically a move, a right angle move. So now I'm at the spot to pick up 2 more beads. So I'm going to pick up my 2 new beads that this unit is missing. I'm going to circle back into the 12 o'clock bead. So basically the opposite bead of the one that we're coming out of. So the other one that's already present, that'll be part of this clock. You can see it came right down like that. Let me show you that again. You can see it pulls right in. And now we have to decide right or left. And if it's helpful, turn your beadwork and you can hold it in the direction that your thread is coming out. So it's coming out in front of you. And that will always make it a little bit more clear, your right or left decision here. So you can see that I'm coming out of this bead here. I can go to the right, which is in this bead, but that's really taking us away from where we want to be. And where we want to get to is right down here. So therefore I'm going to go into my left bead. I'm going to make the direction, the right angle, heading left. Now, I want to recognize what are the 2 beads that are already here that are going to be part of the clock I want to finish. And that's going to be this one and this one. So which one can I go through that also helps me to make a right turn? It's going to be this one here, because if I went through this one, I'm going straight through. Remember, we have to make a right angle, so it's going to be this one or this one here. So therefore, it's going to be this one. And then we're all set up to do another clock. So I'm going to get a little bit more of this done, and I will be back in just a minute to show you finishing off the row. Okay, so I did a little bit more of that second row, and again, you can see that we're just making more of those clocks and more of those compasses. So I'm going to show you the last little bit here and then turning a corner one more time before we end the video. And one thing I do want to mention before I forget is if you're finding that maybe a video format is not as easy for you, you can couple this video along with a blog post that I did that we will link below. I did probably a couple of months ago on right angle weave, where there will be an actual pattern on how to do basic right angle weave that you can print out and work from if that's easier. That shows, arrows of where to go. So both of those 2 things together, you should be good to go. I know some people prefer one format, some people prefer the other. So I'm going to pick up my 2 more beads. And again, just kind of visualize where they're going to go. They're going to go right here to finish off that clock. So we have to circle back into the other part of the clock, because right now, out of the 2 beads that we know are going to be part of this clock, we're coming out of one of them, therefore we're going to go into the other one. You'll pull it down and you'll see it all come together. Just like that, you can see how it pulled right in line. I'll show you that one more time. Pulls right into line. And then you need to, again, make that, if it helps to turn your beadwork, so that way your thread is always pointing away from you, you will always have that definitive right or left decision to make. So you can see the bead is, oops, as I'm going to drop it, you can see that the bead is coming out right here from this bead, and I can go right or I can go left, folks. If I go right, it's into this bead, but again, that's heading into old beadwork and not in the direction of where we want to end up. Therefore, logic should tell us that we have to take a left, and we have to go right into that bead there. And now I'm going to turn my beadwork again, so that way my thread is pointing away from me, which again makes you have to make that right-left decision. So I can go right into this bead, or I can go left into this bead. And in this case, I'm going to want to go left into this bead because then I'm on the outside and I can loop back around and add in my other clock, my very last one. Okay. So I'm ready to get in my last little clock there. It's going to finish up this corner. Identify the two beads present that are going to be part of the clock I'm making, this one and this one. And therefore, if we're already coming out of this one, that means by default we have to go into this one. And you just loop back around. And there's our clock there, pulled in right there. So now just go through and finish up that loop. And then go up that side bead right there to set yourself up to start the next row. Just like that. So remember, when you start the next row, that first unit you make, you do have to pick up the 3. Actually, we'll go back to this color. So we'll circle back in to the bead we're coming out of to start that first unit of this row. And boom, there it is. Then we would just have to travel around and then down here to set ourselves up to do the next unit. And you're basically just doing this sort of loop-de-loop kind of a pattern. So that is the basics of right angle weave, folks. And again, we're going to link you below to the blog post I did that actually has diagrams for doing this with arrows and all that good jazz. So that way you can have something to print out and work from should you like. I think both of them together, you should be good. Leave me any questions or comments below as always. And we'll link you to the products that I used in this video, to our beautiful selection of 4mm fire polish, which I think will give you plenty of beautiful options to play with. Again, if you're newer to right angle weave, a 4mm fire polish I think really is the ideal bead to learn with, especially if you pick something that's a little bit more on the matte or satin side, because it's just sort of easier for your eyes to look at perhaps than something really shiny. Yeah, and check us out on EurekaCrystalBeads.com, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.